Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 26 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Sydney, Australia-based multi-instrumentalist Graham Jesse. Graham has been a part of the Australian music scene at the highest level for 40 years. You'll hear him play the saxophone and flute in a variety of settings, and we also get to discuss his ongoing important work in the grassroots of music education. Please enjoy my conversation with Graham Jesse. Well, hi, Graham, and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. It's fantastic to have you here today as my special guest for episode 26 in the series.
Hi, Brian, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Our audience have just seen and heard you play a wonderful jazz flute solo out front of a quartet. I believe it was an open air concert in an amphitheatre, probably, 20, 30 years ago? How long ago would that have been?
Probably not 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Yeah, it was at an amphitheatre in Castle Craig in just a suburb in Sydney.
Yeah,
And yeah, Castle Craig's a suburb designed by Walter Burley Griffin, and he put an amphitheatre just in amongst the houses.
great.
Um, yeah, and it was run by a committee of people who were interested in the arts. Yeah, so that was just a concert, part of a concert that we were doing there.
Well, it's a fantastic quartet. Do you remember the players, the piano, bass, and drums?
I do. It's Matt McMahon, Brendan Clark on bass, and Hamish Stewart on drums. And Hamish and I go back a long way to when we were teenagers.
Well, it
Yeah.
sounds that quartet just sounds like, there's wonderful communication between the players, everyone giving everyone space. I just
Uh-huh.
want to focus on the flute for a moment because the flute, outside of classical music, the flute's not all that commonly in the spotlight. If I think in jazz, and you and I both have grown up in Australia, and
Yeah.
we were lucky enough to have the late, great Don Burrows as one heck of a person we could model ourselves of a jazz flute player. But outside of Australia, probably if you thought of any sort of commercial success in jazz, and I don't know if there is such a thing, but maybe Herbie Mann and Hubert Laws are probably the two that I could think of as flute players.
Yeah.
How did you come to the flute? What age were you when you first had a play of it?
Well, I can tell you exactly the age. I was 14 because I got a flute for my 14th birthday.
Okay.
Um, my dad played the trombone and he loved jazz. And he was sort of friends with Don Burrows. And so Don was very active when I was a young teenager. You know, you'd
Yeah.
see him on TV, hear him on radio, and he's a very fine player. In fact, the very first record I bought was Don Burrows' Quartet live at the Montreux Jazz Festival.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Don
so
on the
I,
front with his flute too. I remember on
that's
that
right.
album.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
It's a very dynamic photo. He's kind of
Very good
moving.
photo. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'd been playing the saxophone for a few years up until then, and I just because of Don, I really wanted to play the flute. So I got this flute, and um, my dad organised lessons with a guy called Victor McMahon, who's a legend of the flute community, and he was an old man then when I was a young teenager.
Yes,
And Victor McMahon actually was instrumental in getting Don playing the flute too.
yes.
It goes back that far. And Victor was just like the best teacher. It was just a class, wasn't it? Individual lessons, and we used to have fun. He used to tell jokes, but when he was teaching, it was all about the fundamentals. So yeah, so that just got me off to a really good start on the flute. I've always felt comfortable on it, and of course, watching Don play it, that was a
Oh,
huge inspiration. Because this interview is coming up, I've been thinking about, things that have happened. And there's been so many of these times when I've just been blessed to be in the right place at the right time or have these people come into my life. Yeah. So
yes.
Victor was one of those.
So just
Mm.
a question now, and you are a multi-instrumentalist, and I want to ask quite a few questions about that. But the flute itself, I guess the flute for a doubler can be seen as the poor cousin. If you're a saxophone player, you throw all your money and you get a great Selma sax or something. And if you really go hard out, you get an alto and a tenor. Great sax. When it comes to the flute, often it's the beginner's flute that lets you say that I do double on the flute. Just on that video of Spain, do you remember the flute you were playing? What?
Yeah, that was a Muramatsu, and it was
Okay.
actually quite an expensive flute. It was solid silver, only had a C foot joint,
Yeah,
which was common in
fine.
those days.
That's
Yeah.
right. Open hole
Um,
or closed hole?
Open hole, and it was called a thin wall, so it was quite light, and so it made it very responsive, very bright,
Yeah, it's a beautiful
which
sound. Yeah.
which suited me at the time.
Yes.
After that, I went the opposite. I bought a flute, a PAL that was the material's called auramite, which is gold and silver bonded together, and that was a really dark flute. So,
A heavy
so
flute, I imagine.
heavy, very
Yeah,
heavy. So I
yeah.
went from super bright to super dark.
That's
Now I have a Sankyo, which is kind of in the middle.
okay. And
Yeah.
and and also just for the flute players who might be watching this, playing the flute in the open air can be a bit hazardous. And I know
Exactly.
do you want to talk a little bit about of some of the perils of an open air gig when you're, featured on the flute? And how you
Well,
deal with it, I suppose, how you prepare yourself for what can happen.
um, well, the main thing is say a saxophone or a trumpet or whatever, you're blowing into the tube, or the saxophone, the mouthpiece is in your mouth.
Yes.
With the flute, there's this embouchure hole, and you have to blow the air out of your mouth onto the embouchure hole.
Yes.
So if there's big wind coming, it just blows the airstream away, and your sound just stops.
Exactly right. And I don't think a lot of people realise that. And you certainly did a good job. I noticed you're very close to the microphone, but
Yeah,
being
well, you
careful.
have to.
Yeah, being careful not to blow into the microphone, I guess, is another beginner's trick to learn, isn't it? That you think that I'll blow right into that microphone, because all the microphone's going to pick up is the cyclone sound of the air.
That's right.
So it was just great to watch you do that. And I really thought the rapport you had with those other players was just, I love the way no one was talking over each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think nowadays, to some degree, the art of listening, I'm just interested in your thoughts, but the art of listening doesn't seem to be as high as it was in the era that you came up with, the respect. Do you feel that, or is it a little bit of a look at me sort of attitude nowadays in the younger players? Or
Look, I don't really know. I think what has happened is that everyone's technique is now at a very high standard, the younger players.
Yes.
So maybe everyone's trying to be a bit flashy with what they're doing.
Yes.
And that's maybe giving the impression of what you're talking about.
Do you play any chordal instruments?
Look, I play what is called arranger's piano, right? So I can bang out some chords and,
yes.
Where
did you get your sense of harmony from?
Well, I think I've got reasonably good ears, so that kind of helped. Also, in high school, I did music as an elective subject. And in that era, it was very focused on four-part choral writing, a lot of harmony, a lot of that stuff. So, and it's funny, it was just a language that made sense to me pretty much right from the start when I first started playing music. So,
Came naturally to you.
It comes naturally to me. And I think that foundation I got in high school was just absolutely perfect because, as you know, we talk about jazz harmony, blah, 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 but it's all from the same basic harmony that it goes back to Bach's era, essentially.
Yes. Look, I want to move forward. I don't know how long ago this was, but there's a beautiful video of you, I assume on a television show, playing straight soprano sax with Tommy Emmanuel. And it's a beautiful song. I think it's one that Tommy wrote called Since We Met. Tommy's on nylon string acoustic. I think it's Rex Go on rhythm guitar. Was it Rex there? I just can't. I think it looks like Rex.
Yeah, Rex is the only one I can recognise in the rest of the band. I'm not sure who the others are.
So for fans of the podcast, episode 17 featured Rex, and I don't think we smiled as much in any podcast. Rex was just such a happy man. And when he spoke, we just often ended up just laughing. So wonderful guitar player. Yeah. Now, the soprano sax, did you come to that early, or was it just another sort of toy in the toy bag once you got the feel of the alto or whatever?
A bit later, yeah. The alto was my first saxophone, and then the tenor. It's a very common thing, I think, young guys, especially in the late teens, early 20s, they're just really drawn to the tenor sax because it is the tenor range, same as our voice and Coltrane, Michael Brecker.
Yep.
But then I really was getting into Dave Lehman's playing, and he was playing a lot of sopranos. So I bought myself a soprano.
Right, straight. And they're very different. I've got a straight soprano and a curved soprano, and they're very different instruments. Like the straight soprano, you absolutely feel like you are playing a soprano. The curve, to me, you feel like you're playing a bit of a funky alto, a higher pitched alto.
Right.
Have you got any thoughts on curved soprano versus straight or not?
I've never actually played one, to be honest.
Okay. They're a beautiful instrument. They don't feel like a soprano sax. They seriously feel like an alto sax, a shrunk down alto.
Shrunk down alto.
But they're in that range. But the straight soprano, the minute you play a note, it's like, wow, hello, there's the soprano. One final geeky question. I notice you don't use a neck strap when you play the straight soprano.
Mm-hmm.
They can be a heavy instrument. Is that something just always, why not a neck strap? You just felt comfortable without it? Or?
Well, I don't know that neck strap helps a lot because with the alto and the tenor, the instrument sits like the weight is held mainly by the neck strap.
Yes.
Soprano, I hold it out front.
Mm.
So gravity's pulling it down. So the strap doesn't seem to do much. But you're exactly right. The little bit of RSI that I developed at one stage was from playing the soprano, because
They're a
I was
heavy
having to
instrument.
support all the weight
Yeah.
with my right
Right
thumb.
thumb. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I do use a strap, and I know exactly what you say. You know, you cannot support the whole instrument. I just find it does take maybe 50% of the weight.
Right.
And I've only got little hands, little hands and little fingers. And, you know, if I try and play the soprano, after about a minute, I'm just thinking, oh, you know, this is hard work. I'm focusing on the holding it rather than the playing it. Let's have a look and listen of you play beautifully here with Tommy Emmanuel, Since We Met. Tell us a little bit about working with Tommy Emmanuel, one of the world's most amazing musicians.
Oh, consummate musician, just so beautiful what he does. Tommy and I worked together quite a lot when we were younger. We used to do gigs together. We used to do a lot of sessions for TV themes and jingles. It was a jingle company called Wham that Tommy and I used to work for. Tommy would often put down the rhythm bed. He'd play drums, guitar, bass, electric bass.
Yeah.
And then I'd come in, if there was a horn section or strings required, I'd write that and produce that and then play any saxophone. So we worked together quite a bit. I played on a couple of his records, his early ones, and he played one track on my first record.
And I loved in that video how he actually looked over at you and more or less, Graham, go now. Just reminding you now's your song. It was so relaxed. Where have you developed your concept of tone and sound from? How did you get to where you are today on those various instruments?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. It's being inspired by people that you listen to. And then also just practice, a lot of practice, especially long notes, I think, for a wind instrument. Long notes are just gold.
Yes.
If you start your practice session with some long notes, that gets you in the good mood, good frame of mind, because it slows down your breathing, all of that. And you're not concentrating on fast technical things. So you just focus in on the tone. Yeah, so it's a combination of those things. I think we sort of all end up with our own tone to a certain extent because we've all got slightly different mouth structures, internal mouth structures, and that influences the tone as well. And it's also, especially with saxophone, it's a choice of gear too.
Yes.
I don't think there's any other acoustic instrument where you can get such a wide variety of tone, depending on the choice of mouthpiece and reed and just concept.
We're going to look now at a duo performance you did with Bonnie Jensen, a great singer and piano player. And I think this was recorded live at a club in Tokyo, Stolen Moments, the Oliver Nelson song.
Yeah.
Now, you're playing the tenor sax here, a very different creature to the straight soprano sax.
Yeah.
So when you pick up the tenor, and obviously different equipment, and I think you might be playing an ebonite mouthpiece on the tenor in this clip, are you? Or
that is, I still play that one. That's called a Drake. It's not hard rubber. It looks like hard rubber, but it's some sort of composite stuff. It's
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And that gives a unique sound quality, I guess. The player's still got to do it.
Yeah.
You set up your equipment that you're comfortable with, but when you pick up the tenor sax and go into Graham in tenor sax mode, are you thinking anything particular? Say when you do a beautiful solo in Stolen Moments, we'll come in just towards the end of the piano solo and it comes into your solo, and there's such a rapport between you and Bonnie. You're looking at each other. There's the nods. You're not in your own isolation booth playing the tenor and her over there playing the piano. But what's going through your mind? Do you feel like the tenor man in that thing, or do you just feel like Graham and you're just hearing those sounds?
I think I feel like the tenor man, and it comes back to what I said before about practice. And if I do enough long notes on the tenor, I pick up the tenor, I just automatically go into that zone. Pick up the soprano, pick up the flute, I just feel like a flute player.
Yeah.
Because I've spent the time getting in touch with that instrument.
Did you just every birthday grab another instrument and have a go, or did you get some competence on one before you moved to the other?
On the surface, it seems, well, it's easy. It's the same fingering. The music gets transposed for us, so off you go. But tonally, they're very different. It's a different feel. So, you can often tell if someone's not comfortable on the alto or the tenor. They get a great tone on the tenor, but the alto's a bit weird.
Yes.
So it's, yeah. I mean, I feel very comfortable playing the saxophone and the flute. I play the clarinet as well. That's been a bit of a longer journey for me because I came to that a bit later on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look and a listen to you playing some beautiful tenor sax here live, just in a jazz club. And I think something for our audience to realise is that if a recording's done in a recording studio, the real magic of the player's tone is captured and the beautiful reverbs and all of that. But, you're just in a little jazz club here. So the recording quality is probably, I think the video's filmed on a phone. So, it's probably not the best example of your wonderful tenor sound. It is what it is.
Well, there was no mic either on the saxophone.
Ah.
Such a small club.
Yeah.
I had a mic for the flute, but the tenor I was just playing acoustically.
And I think that's important that our audience keep this in mind. It is what it is, and life is what it is. And when you play, you can't demand suddenly that you've got a Neumann microphone in front of you because you want a good sound on your tenor, but you get a wonderful sound, and it feels like we were there in the club. Let's have a look and a listen to Stolen Moments. I heard a wonderful podcast by Gordon Goodwin from the
Oh,
Big
yes.
Fat Band. And of course,
Yeah.
Gordon's known as an arranger and a piano player, but he's also quite popular as a tenor sax player. And he
Yeah.
tells a wonderful story that when he was in high school in America, he's growing up in Los Angeles, he was self-taught and he just sort of picked up the saxophone and honked away, I guess like a lot of us do, and sort of found his own way. And he got quite high up within the school system. I think he was actually picked to play in one of the all-state bands. But himself, he knew that he was struggling with some aspects of playing the saxophone. So Phil Woods, the great jazz alto player, Phil Woods, temporarily moved to Los Angeles for about a year or something and did a lot of work in LA. And a mate of his found Phil's number, and Gordon rings up Phil Woods and says, "Hi, look, I'm Gordon Goodwin. I'm still at school. Can I come around and have a lesson?" "Yeah, okay." Okay. Phil says, "Okay, bring your horn around." And Gordon said, like, he unpacks his saxophone. Phil's out in the kitchen making a sandwich, just warm up.
Yeah.
And he plays, and he'd barely played half a scale, and he hears from the kitchen, "Stop! How dare you bring a tone like that around to me for a lesson?" He's just letting him have it from the. And Gordon's just thinking, but I'm playing pretty good. I'm in all these bands and everything. And Gordon, in retrospect, said he must have sounded terrible, and he was doing a lot of things wrong with his embouchure. And Phil had another saxophone friend staying with him, and he said to whatever that guy's name is, Roger, go and give that kid a lesson. Phil would not be
He
in the
refused.
same room as him. But did you have any moments like that where you were fundamentally perhaps not playing the instrument in the best possible way? What's your story with that?
Oh, definitely. On the saxophone, yeah, I was in a police boys band. They provided the instrument and they also provided the tuition. And yeah, the teacher was a nice man, but he didn't really do anything with me. And I developed all these bad habits because I think it's quite a common thing with young kids. They think the more effort they put in, the more is going to come out. And that's not the case because you've got to actually allow the reed to vibrate. It's the air, your breath that provides the energy for the sound. But embouchure wise, it's got to be not too tight. Um, so then I had some lessons with Cole Loughnane,
Oh,
who
great player.
who
Yeah.
helped me out a lot. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And then a while after that, I went and lived in New York for 9 months and had some lessons with all sorts of people. I had lessons from Dave Liebman, Eddie Daniels, and most importantly, a guy called Joe Allard, who once again, he was an old man when I was young there in New York. And his thing was just tone production. That he didn't talk at all about scales, technique, anything like that. It's just overtone series, embouchure. And he really, really helped me a huge amount. There's no substitute for sitting in the same room as a musician and hearing what they sound like, seeing how they do it.
I
Yeah.
agree. There's something in the air when you're, whether you're 10 feet away or 20 feet or 1 meter away, there's
Yeah.
some magic there. I want to move forward now because you're a very accomplished arranger. And I want to play a track called Does Anybody Know What Time It Is, which is the old Chicago song, beautifully arranged. Now, in this particular clip, you leave the saxophone on the stand. You're not in the band.
No.
Can you tell us a bit about this project and particularly that clip? What exactly was your role in that song and in that recording?
Well, I got a phone call out of the blue from this man that I didn't know at the time, Rob Thomas, and said, "Oh, hi, Graham, I want to make an album and I want you to arrange it and produce it." I said, "Okay." And he's saying, "I want to have, use a big band."
Yep,
And I remember saying to him, "Well, it's going to cost quite a bit because you've got to hire a nice big studio, you've got to pay all the musicians, there's mixing."
absolutely.
So I just sort of almost off the top of my head just gave him a very a vague kind of figure as what it might cost, and I was expecting him to say, "Oh, okay, forget it."
That's right. Yeah,
And he said, "Yeah, that's okay." So that was the perfect job because he allowed me to pretty much write whatever I wanted to.
yeah,
I was able to do demos with the notation software, which you can do these days. But yeah, so he chose all the songs. I think about half the album is big band, the other half is like small group with strings, that sort of thing. So that was a really great project. And the other thing that I love about doing these projects is I get to hire all these musicians that I admire and I like playing with, like Andy Gander on the drums.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Dave Panicki on trombone, I saw, and
Yeah.
Ed Wilson at that
Yeah,
time
Ed was
on
in there.
trombone.
Yeah.
Ralph Pyle. Ralph's been a
Yeah.
guest on my podcast. Wonderful player. And you deliberately made the decision that not to be a player on, or certainly on that arrangement. You wanted to hear the end result and be in the control room. Is that the story, or?
That's right. All the big band tracks and all the rhythm section tracks, I was in the control room.
Yes.
Because if I'm playing, it's a bit hard. I can't concentrate so much on the big picture.
Yeah.
I'm more focused on my own playing.
Let's have a look and a listen to this. Is a beautiful recording. I think you're in Studio 301 there.
That's
are you?
right.
Which
One that doesn't exist anymore.
did they replace it, or it's just?
They replaced it. Yeah, there's another building also in Alexandria, which is a
Okay.
nice big studio.
Yes, but that one was legendary. I think at the time
Yeah.
it was sort of a Abbey Road sort of tier studio, wasn't it? It was one of the
Yes.
very few that would be regarded as top tier. So beautiful studio, brilliant musicians, and the arrangement is fantastic. Graham. It really is.
Oh, thank you.
For you to sit there, and make the decisions on those, what do you want those trombone players to play, the trumpet players? It's just wonderful. And let's have a look and a listen to, does anybody know what time it is?
As I was walking down the street one day, a man came up to me and asked me what the time was that was on my watch. Yeah, and I said, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? As I was walking down the street one day, a pretty lady looked at me and said her diamond watch had stopped cold dead. Whoa! And I said, yes, I said, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? As I was walking down the street one day, being pushed and shoved by people trying to beat the clock. Whoa, whoa, I just don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And I said, yes, I said, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? Anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? You know I can't imagine why. We've all got time enough to cry. Everybody's worried about time. I'm not worried.
Now, lurking in the trombone section, the great Ed Wilson. I noticed Ed just quietly sitting there playing the trombone sharp. Now, anyone in Australia who, grew up at about in our era, in our age bracket, could not go past remembering the Daley Wilson Big Band. They were a very modern sounding big band, major sponsorship in those days by a cigarette company, and they would tour right across Australia. I first got to see them in Brisbane, but in a northern suburb of Brisbane, and Marsha Hines was singing with them. Mm-hmm. It would have been in the 70s, I don't know, the mid-70s?
Mid-70s, yeah.
Yeah. But you played with the Daley Wilson Big Band. What era were you playing with them?
It was around that era, just after Marsha left them, I think.
Okay.
Because I was going to the conservatorium studying jazz there. It wasn't even a diploma course. It was just like an extension course.
Yes.
And Howie Smith was teaching there, American guy they brought out
Yes.
to get the jazz course started.
Yep.
Another episode in my life where I think how lucky I am, because Howie was an arranger and a saxophone player. So there I was with him.
Great.
And the Daily Wilson Big Band were about to go on tour, and one of their saxophone players got sick and they needed to find someone quickly.
Yes.
And I think they phoned up the con and said, any young players there whom you could recommend? And so I just got this phone call. And it was an Australia-wide tour.
Oh.
So, and I was still going to uni at that moment, at that time, Sydney University, studying Bachelor of Music.
Yes.
Which was quite different to studying jazz. It was quite conservative in those days. So off I went, and I never went back to uni to finish my degree. Not that I'm that proud of that, but I probably, in this day and age, I would have finished it.
Yes,
but, But I figured I'd learn a lot more by being in amongst it.
So was Doug Foskett lead alto when you were there? Who was playing lead?
Yes, Doug Foskett, and he's the man that got me the gig on Midday Show too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Doug, he was a great guy. Did you know Doug? Did you?
Well, I didn't know Doug, but I saw Doug. Doug was playing lead when Marsha Hines was singing. So I actually got to hear Doug in that band up in Brisbane that night. And it's one of those memories. It's like when you first hear Don Burrows live, you just sort of, what planet are these guys on? That band was, and Warren Daly on drums, mate. Your sense of rhythm, what was it like with Warren? In the engine room,
Yeah. Well, what struck me was that if you've got like a note coming up and it's on whatever beat it is, like it's a big horn accent, bow.
Yeah.
Warren would play a fill leading up to that so that you could not play that note in the wrong place.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
They say that of Buddy Rich. I did an interview with Alan Kaplan, who played lead trombone, wonderful studio trombone player in Los Angeles, and did an episode with Alan. And I got to say to him, well, Buddy Rich didn't read music. How did it go with the big band? And he just said, oh, well, Buddy would pay a reading drummer to come in,
I know,
play the charts a couple of times, and then he had it. And what Alan said is, not only did he have it, he had it forever. They'd pull out a chart that the band hadn't played for 12 months, and Buddy's just banging it. And exactly what you said, he said you couldn't but nail your part at the right time. It was just incredible, which is, wow. And for you to experience that.
Yes, as a young saxophone player, it was fantastic.
Oh, mate, opportunities. I want to come back to you now on tenor, again in a quartet setting. I was fortunate, even though I've lived in Queensland all my life, I'd go on pilgrimages to Melbourne and Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate to be going to Sydney at an era when Errol Buddle was the undisputed tenor man of Sydney, and regularly playing. At the time I got to see him, it was with the Cole Noel and Errol Buddle quartet. Mm-hmm. So Dieter Voigt on bass and Warren Daly on drums.
Yep.
So we're at this tiny little club in the Rocks. It wasn't a club, it was a restaurant. And here's Errol, a bit like you. I don't think they even had microphones in this restaurant. Yeah. Errol's there on tenor, Cole Nolan on acoustic piano, Warren on brushes, and Dieter Voigt on acoustic bass. And they play Bye Bye Blackbird. To this day, like Errol on his Buddles Doubles album, I'm sure you're aware of that.
It's a great album,
Errol's version of Bye Bye Blackbird on that, I still to all my students say, mate, just get hold of that. And if you want to hear someone develop the ultimate melodic tenor sax solo, listen to how Errol gets his way through Bye Bye Blackbird. Now, we're going to look at a clip of you, again, out in the open air, so you're not at Studio 301. You haven't got the Neumanns and the Lexicon reverbs. So again, it is what it is, the sound quality. But you did an original blues and you just called it Easy Goes It. Yeah. And I thought, when you started playing, I just thought, hello, this guy has heard Errol. Because I think the way you played that, it reminded me of how Errol used to play the blues in a quartet. Do you remember? You must have. What was it like hearing Errol Buddle live when you were growing up?
Oh, look, it was fantastic. Errol played on. after that tour of the David Wilson Big Band, we did a recording, and Errol was in the studio there.
Wow.
I sat next to him in Channel 9, and there's a nighttime show there for a while.
Yeah.
And he was playing, I think he was on alto then, and I was on tenor.
Okay.
We swap around.
Yeah.
But I know Warren Daly is a huge fan of Errol Buttles. When Errol died, Warren put this fantastic thing together. He organised Errol's funeral, and I didn't realise what a successful figure he was in America, touring around there.
And he pioneered the use of the double reeds in jazz, the bassoon and all of that.
Yeah, all those instruments, yeah.
And just on that same story, I got the chance to send, I never met Errol Buttle, and I've never met Warren Daly. But I went overseas to Los Angeles, a bit like you, a bit of an experimental thing. At the time, I thought I'd become a music superstar, but happily come back to Australia about 4 months later and thought, Australia's pretty good in so many aspects. But while I was there, I got to see in LA a lot of the big names, including Plaz Johnson, playing at Dante Jazz Club, which is no longer there. But I'm sitting there, 10 feet away from Plaz Johnson and his quartet. And Plaz is in full flight. I forget who he had playing with him, but all superstars with him. And do you know, when I came back to Australia, which was very close after watching Plaz Johnson play in Los Angeles, that was the night I got to sit in this intimate little restaurant with Errol Buttle and Warren Daly. And I'm not joking. I mean, Plaz was amazing in his band. Errol and his band were, to me, light years ahead of what I heard in Los Angeles, just in tone, in musicality, in sensitivity. I got the opportunity to send an email to Warren and tell him that. And Warren's reply was, Errol's quite ill. I'm going to take your email around and show it to him, Brian. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah.
That's a little connection I had in a virtual way. Yeah. Warren was so chuffed that, someone could pick up that what they were doing was pretty special. That's wonderful, right? So let's have a look and a listen to Easy Goes It. You're with that great quartet again. You're playing tenor, and you just start on your own, which is a wonderful thing where you just kick this song off solo tenor and the band comes in beautifully in time after your first chorus. in that clip, it looks to me like you were playing a Dukoff mouthpiece on the tenor, which everyone did at one stage.
They did. You've got very keen eyes, Brian.
That's right. And it goes to what we were saying a little bit earlier, that horses for courses, different gear for different sounds and different setups. Are you what you'd call, and I think I know the answer here, but are you like an equipment junkie, or do you tend to go through some phases and largely stick with setups? What's been your equipment journey?
Well, I've been through the equipment junkie phase at
Okay.
times.
Yes.
I think it's good to experiment with different gear sometimes because it keeps you engaged. You hear different sounds.
Yes.
Instruments respond a bit differently. But that Duke-off, I've still got that one because in that time, Michael Brecker was playing a Duke-off for a while.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
well, not everyone, but a lot of tenor players wanted to get that model D9 Duke-off, and I've still got it here.
Yes.
I've moved on from it.
Also, clip-on mics. Now, I notice in that Easy Goes It When You're Outside, I think you had a clip-on mic.
Yeah.
They can be evil little monsters, but they give you freedom. What's been your relationship with the clip-on mics?
Well, as you said, that gives you freedom. You don't have to stand in the one position. You can kind of move a bit more.
Yes.
The drawback is with a mic on a stand, especially if you're playing in, say, a horn section or an ensemble and you've got a solo, you just naturally lean in a bit closer to the mic for your solos and then you pull back for the ensemble stuff. Well, a clip-on, you can't do that.
Yes.
The mic's all at the same distance. So I have to force myself, if I'm using one, I have to force myself to be a bit more aware of my dynamic range, like play a little bit down dynamically for the ensemble stuff and then project more for solos.
That's interesting. Kerry Bedell. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I had the honour of only seeing Kerry Bedell sing live once. I think it was at the Basement. Again, it would have been in the 70s, but I don't think I've ever witnessed a better female vocalist than Kerry. Just extraordinary. A musician's musician with her voice. Tell us about your association with Kerry. How did you get to work with Kerry Bedell or know Kerry Bedell?
Well, she had a band. It was a quartet plus Kerry. It was called, name of the band was Compared to What?
Yes.
And I think the reason for that name was it was a very eclectic repertoire. Everything from pop songs to jazz to funk to rock, you name it.
Yes.
It always had a bit of a jazz kind of slant to it. And so the sax player was in it, left for some reason, I'm not sure why, and I was friends with the bass player, Alan Freeman,
Okay.
and so I just got a recommendation to join it.
Yep.
And once again, how lucky was I to be in a band with a singer like Kerry, who just has such great pitch, great time, and we used to do like 50% of the performance at these clubs was instrumental. So we used to do an instrumental, a vocal, instrumental, a vocal.
Okay. Yeah.
But for the instrumentals, she would still sing. She would just do the wordless scat.
Yeah.
Either in unison or harmony with me. Often I was playing soprano. So she'd be the same note as me. So I just really had to get my act together playing in tune.
One of the things I love about these podcasts is the opportunity to put a spotlight on some players that people have probably heard you but would never know who you are. But I, for one, have utmost respect. Can you imagine having to be there doubling with Kerry Bedell? Like, from your point of view, I just know what you're thinking. You got to nail not only the notes, but the tuning, because her tuning just exquisite.
Spot on. Yeah. Very, very supportive too, because, we a bit later on, I used to do work with Kerry, with Julian Lee.
Yes.
And I remember, there was the era of the cassette, the little portable cassette. So some gig was recorded and we're listening back and there's Julian on the piano. I remember Kerry saying, "Wow, listen to that. Hasn't Julian got great time?" Oh. It was her sort of polite way of saying, "This is something you should work on, Graham." Yeah. Yeah. And I'm always up for that. Yeah. Yeah. Give me feedback.
Look, you should be so proud of what you've achieved and are still achieving. Now, we want to have a look at Perfect Stranger, which I think was with the Midday Band.
Yep.
And One thing that blows me away in this arrangement is there's only 5 brass players. There's
Yeah.
you on alto and your colleague. Is it Lee? Who was your
Lee
colleague?
Hutchings. Yep. I sat next to Lee for many years there. Good friend.
Oh,
Yep.
you got 2 trumpets and a trombone. Yet the sound of that band is extraordinary. Do you know who did the arrangement for Perfect Stranger?
I think there might have been a guy called David Basden.
Okay.
It could have been a chart by Julian as well.
Oh, look, the
I'm not
arrangement.
really sure.
Extraordinary.
But on that particular clip, a big shout out to Paul Panicki on lead trumpet because he just absolutely nails it.
Yes.
And not just nails it, just with style and finesse.
Yeah.
And Paul just would, that's just another day at the office for Paul.
Oh, what I wanted to mention, Paul, I also wanted to mention you take a wonderful little cameo on flute. And like you said, the microphone's so far away, you've had to lean right down to the microphone. And I wanted to mention Paul Panicki because what a wonderful lead trumpet player.
Yeah.
But Kerry Bedell soars up there. Paul is playing as good as he can, as high as he can. Kerry just goes right up there with him.
She's with him, yeah.
It's unbelievable. Let's all take a break and have a look and a listen to Perfect Stranger, Kerry Bedell out front of the Midday, the Channel 9 show band.
It was after last call. I was staring in my drink when you walked right up and sat right down. I didn't know what to think. I had just been burned by romance. Ooh, but you looked hot to trot. But all in all, I had my doubts about the way everything worked out. You were the perfect stranger, perfect stranger. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back to you. Now when it comes to close encounters, you are right out of this world. But we're living out a fantasy. I'm not ready to be your girl. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't like you. I hope that we meet again. But if sometime I cross your mind, you really need a friend, I'll be your perfect stranger, perfect stranger. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back to you. Oh, baby, you look so fine. I can't stay there. I'll be your perfect stranger, perfect stranger. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back to you. When it comes to close encounters, you were right out of this world. But we're living out a fantasy. I'm not ready to be your girl. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't like you. Oh, I hope that we meet again. But if sometime I cross your mind and you really need a friend, I'll be your perfect stranger, perfect stranger. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back. Do me the way you do and I'll do it back.
Graham, what a breathtaking arrangement of Perfect Stranger. Beautifully executed by all of the players. Absolutely world-class singing from Kerry. I want to take you back now to the work you did at Studio 301, and this time I want to play She Was Too Good to Me, another track from the Rob Thomas album. But on this occasion, you are playing the alto sax feature, and the sound is absolutely glorious because you get to hear in a controlled environment your alto playing. Who were some of your idols on alto sax when you were growing up?
Well, you mentioned Phil Woods, Charlie Parker, of course. I went through a stage of being obsessed with Dave Sanborn.
Love Dave, yeah.
Great stylist.
Yes.
Talking about groove and rhythm.
Yes.
I suppose that they would be the main ones. Oh, there's Maceo Parker. Oh, Cannonball Adderley.
Oh, wow.
I remember that So What track on the Kind of Blue Miles album.
Your sound here is just, I guess it's a homogenation of all of those players and just you being you. But it's something I think if there's a young saxophone student out there watching this is not easy to do. This is a glorious melodic solo playing you play here. It's just wonderful. So let's have a look and a listen to Graham playing beautiful alto sax. And I think you also did this arrangement, did you?
I did, yeah. So I didn't play it live with the band. We recorded the rhythm section strings and then I overdubbed the solo.
Yeah, let's have a look and a listen. Absolutely beautiful. She Was Too Good to Me.
She was too good to me. How can I get along now? So close she stood to me. Everything seems all wrong now. She would have brought me the sun, making me smile. That was her fun. When I was mean to her, she'd never say, go away now. I was a king to her. Who's gonna make me play now? It's only natural. I'm so blue. She was too good to be true. never say go away now. I was a king to her. Who's gonna make me play now? It's only natural that I'm so blue. She was too good to be true.
So as a multi-instrumentalist, now in this clip here, you're seen playing, and I wrote it down because I lost track of it. You're playing tin whistle, which is that glorious little kid's instrument, soprano and tenor sax, the B-flat clarinet, concert alto and piccolo flutes. I think that's what you're playing, and your colleague is playing all the other ones that you're not. It's such a wonderful moment, and at the end the whole band just gives you two guys a really great applause. All the trumpet guys, I mean, you just see they're just wow. Do you remember doing this?
I do remember doing this, and so Jeff Harvey was the musical director, right? And very funny man, very good sense of timing, you know, generally funny and great to work with. And piano player, loved music. Good arranger, good musical director. And his mission was to keep music front and center of the midday show.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So he would do whatever it takes. So this was like novelty tunes. Great. But as long as it features the band, he's into it. And this was an idea he had. Okay, let's feature these two guys.
Oh.
And this chart I can remember was written by David Bereston.
Okay.
Fantastic arrangement, because I love what he does in the middle. Lee picks up the cor anglais.
Yes.
Right? And it
goes classical.
Morphs into this nice, pastoral countryside, rolling hills kind of thing.
And also I noticed the arranger gave both of you just enough time to change instruments. There was no ridiculous, I know it was quick work, but you know, sometimes in an arrangement, change the flute. Seriously? You know, like
2 bars.
Exactly. How am I going to do this? But I just seem to notice that, you know, in amongst all of that madness, it just seemed like if you were on top of your game, you could make all those changes, you know.
Well, it actually worked pretty well, because it's St. Thomas is a 16-bar tune.
Yes.
And in cut common, 16 bars goes by reasonably quickly, but that is definitely enough time to change instruments.
Yes.
So we each had one chorus. The camera will be on Lee playing his oboe.
Yes.
And while it's on Lee, I'm changing instruments, and then vice versa.
It's masterful. Let's enjoy and have a look and a listen to a great version of St. Thomas, which is really highlights what a professional multi-instrumentalist you are. Graham, music education, not your music education, but what role, if any, do you currently play, I guess, in passing on the knowledge that you've acquired over decades and decades of professional musicianship?
Well, I teach at a couple of schools at the moment, and yeah, I feel like it's sort of my duty in a way to pass on my love of music. And most of these kids in these schools aren't going to become musicians, but they're an appreciation of music. I think is a good thing because they're the kids in schools who play an instrument. They're the ones who are going to go to a jazz club. They're going to go to a symphony concert. They're not just going to be into just pop music. And I think to keep all these alternate musics alive, we need an audience. And so I think that's why school music programs are so valuable.
I agree.
And also I just get I've got a few private students who come to me, or either HSC kids or some tertiary people who want to work on whatever. And so that's pretty much my thing. I don't teach at a uni or anything at the moment.
You wrote a wonderful piece of music for piano and flute, and you called it Waltz Part 2 from a jazz flute suite. Now, it features Virginia Taylor on the concert flute and Simon Tedeschi on piano, two wonderful musicians. I understand Virginia comes from a classical music background.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about how did this project come about, maybe a bit about Virginia and a bit about Simon and just a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, this is a project that was probably about 2 years in the making, writing-wise. I'd always wanted to write some pieces for flute and piano. So yes, that they definitely have a bit of a jazz flair to them, but everything is fully notated. And getting back to, I was saying earlier how I love, if I'm doing a project, I love employing musicians that I admire and I like.
Yes.
Yeah. So in this instance, I specifically wanted to get classical musicians to play it. And yeah, so I had met Virginia a couple of years earlier at a flute convention. I was doing a little concert and she was very friendly, made a point of coming up and saying hello. And so I just contacted her out of the blue saying, I've written these pieces. Would you be interested in recording them for me?
Yeah.
And Simon Tedeschi was a referral from a friend. I didn't actually know him.
Okay.
So I just sent them the music and some MIDI demos, and obviously they liked them enough because there was a fair bit of preparation required from them to learn the parts. And so then we went into the studio and recorded them. And once again, I just love hearing other people's interpretation of what I write.
Your music mind, I can understand how you could write the flute part. I'm still a bit intrigued how you could write that piano part. How did you come? It's a beautiful piano part. How did you come up with that?
Well, like I said earlier, I play arranger's piano, so I can, play chords and say, well, okay, these fall under the fingers and everything. But
Okay.
I did get some feedback through Simon's friend who hooked me up with him.
Okay.
That, gee, these are pretty hard, these things. And I'm thinking, this guy's playing Rachmaninoff. Those classical piano pieces that are written by piano players, they sound incredibly flashy, but
Yes.
there would be patterns that fall under the fingers, where I'm thinking more of the voicings of each chord. I want that chord, I want this one. And so I don't think some of it flowed very naturally.
Okay.
Simon did a brilliant job.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's have a look and a listen. This is a beautiful duet, concert flute and piano on a composition that Graham wrote called Waltz Part 2 from a jazz flute suite. long have you been a professional musician in Australia?
Well, all my life, well, when I say all my life, since I left school, or even when I was in school, my last year, I started gigging around. Or even before that, I was played in some garage bands and all that sort of stuff. But pretty much as soon as I left school, there was a lot of work around in that era, which you would remember, all the clubs, RSL clubs, leagues clubs,
Yeah.
bowling clubs, they all had a band.
Yes.
So you could get lots of freelance work, and the music wasn't all that great sometimes, but you turn up, play some of the tunes by ear, some of the current pop songs, read some charts for the show, the cabaret show, go home. Next night you'd be somewhere else. So I was actually earning quite a good living straight out of school doing freelance music, and I pretty much haven't stopped.
No.
I've also do writing. I also teach a bit.
And you're still traveling around, you're still playing. I know us trying to set up this podcast interview, it's clear you're still a busy guy. You're not sitting on your hands. If you look at the situation nowadays, it's very, very different. I know exactly what you mean. Any country town or city in Australia back in the 1970s and through the 80s and that, every pub on a Friday or Saturday night would have a band, not just a soloist. They'd have a 3, 4 or 5 piece group. And the groups might have been pretty horrendous, but people were enjoying it, and there was live music everywhere you looked. What advice would you give to someone growing up in today's world who likes playing an acoustic instrument, wants to make a living as a musician? What do you think you'd say? What do they need today to have a crack at it?
I'm not sure that I'm the best qualified person to talk about that, because I know there's like quite a few generations below me, and I know some of them do seem to be quite busy.
Okay.
I'm not sure what they do. They might do more functions or touring with pop bands or whatever.
Yes.
Having said that, I think probably one of the main things is to just hone your craft. Just constantly be making sure that you're playing as well as you can. I think that's foundational. I think young people, if they're attending a university or college or whatever, that's where you make a lot of your connections as well.
Yes.
Like-minded people, and they'll in those places the bands will form.
Yeah.
But I know you hear some people sort of saying, "Oh, the scene's no good" or whatever. But I try to be a bit more optimistic. I think certainly wouldn't discourage anyone from pursuing it.
No.
Go for it. Yeah.
I heard the great Chuck Finley, the famous American Los Angeles session player. Someone asked him exactly that same question, and his answer was, "There's always room at the top for a great player." And I thought, isn't that is so true? If you had your time over again, would you do anything different? You've had the ability, you've been through all these things. Would you change anything? Or
I would probably have been a bit more methodical when I was very younger with all my practice. That's one thing, perhaps. But as I said just a bit earlier, I was getting plenty of work anyway. So I was just sort of part of my practice was just playing on gigs, and that's a valid way to improve as well.
I think part of your success has been what you said a little bit earlier. You had some opportunities to be sitting in with some amazing players, and you realise that, hey, I'm not where they are. But you made a decision to get up to that standard. And I think that's just the flow of that, people hearing how you could handle that and improve, has kept you gainfully employed all your life. Best way for people to connect with you? Someone wants to reach out and just say hello. What's the best? How would you like them to connect with you?
Well, there's a contact page on my website. My address is music@grahamjesse.com.au.
Great. And they can
they can find it on my website anyway.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We want to go out with a wonderful clip again featuring Kerry Bedell and the midday TV band, Old Devil Moon. This one also features an extraordinary talent who sadly has passed away now, but Julian Lee. I think he came from New Zealand, but he was a blind musician. On your YouTube channel, I think, or on your website, you have a wonderful little moment where Julian Lee is dictating to, I don't know whether it's you or someone else, an arrangement, on treble clef, F crotchet. Yeah, and he's saying out aloud what, had he been able to see, what he would have wrote. Tell us a bit about this. This musician was extraordinary with a capital E. Tell me a little bit about Julian Lee.
Well, Julian, as you said, he's a Kiwi. He moved out here. He also spent some time, he lived in America, working there as an arranger. So incredible ears, incredible memory too. And I remember playing on some sessions. He wrote a double, this is record, LP.
Yes.
Double record for Ricky May.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So a lot of music. And Julian wrote all the charts. But he would just literally dictate four bars at a time. This is the rhythm, this is the notes. Voice 2, same rhythm, different notes.
Incredible.
But, I remember these sessions, we did them at the ABC, and Julian would be sitting in the middle of the room. We'd play through it and he'd say, second tenor, I think you got a wrong note, bar such and such. Amazing ears and
and what a great piano player too.
Yeah.
Fantastic piano. Do you know who wrote the chart for Old Devil Moon? Is it Julian's chart?
I think it might have been Julian's chart, because if you listen through it to the end, it's got the beautiful coda section that moves through all these different key centers.
Yes.
It's a masterful chart as well.
And it's this big sound again. You've got a small big band. There's only 2 saxophones, but it sounds, because of the voicings, it's an illusion. Sadly, Kerry passed away quite a long time ago, but what a talent. So we'll go out with that, but just before we go, Graham, I want to say thanks for taking part in this conversation. I've been wanting to get you on. I'm gradually going through a lot of the great Sydney session players, and I've had you on my list there for quite some time. Just extraordinary what you've done in music. Any thoughts of putting the reeds away and retiring soon, or not?
Oh, look, not at this point, because I still feel like I'm playing well and I enjoy it. So yeah, I'll keep going. Definitely.
Thanks for taking part in this. It's been so much fun. A real honour. Thanks, Graham.
Oh, look, thanks very much, Brian. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a lot of fun talking about all these things.
Thank you.
Suddenly, something in your eyes I see soon begins bewitching me. It's that old devil moon that you stole from the sky. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. You and your glance make this romance too hot to handle. Stars in the skies blazing their light can't hold a candle to bubble your razzle dazzle. You got me high and wide on a magic carpet ride full of butterflies inside. I wanna cry, wanna croon, wanna laugh like a loon. It's that old devil moon in your eyes. Tell 'em, Julie, baby. This romance too hot to handle. Stars in the night blaze in their light can't hold the candle. dove. Oh, devil moon deep in your eyes blinds me with love. Oh, devil moon deep in your eyes blinds me with love. Oh, devil moon deep in your eyes blinds me with love. I mean love, yes,
For the collaboration video to end this episode, I asked Graham if he had a preference as to what material he'd like us to record. Graham suggested the jazz standard blue bossa, and he also asked if I could accompany his alto flute playing for this song on the pedal steel guitar. Blue bossa has been recorded by some of the most famous instrumentalists in the history of jazz. However, this may be the very first recording where we have an alto flute and a pedal steel guitar taking the lead roles. Please enjoy our version of Blue Bossa.